Hello. Tonight we begin with the most fascinating fairy tale. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The shirt collar. Once, in the wardrobe of a fine and fashionable gentleman, there lived a shirt collar of quite extraordinary pretensions. The gentleman possessed, among other worldly treasures, a boot jack, a hairbrush, and a comb of tortoiseshell. But the pride of all of these possessions was the collar, white, high, and stiff, so fine in linen, and so grand in opinion that it imagined itself the noblest piece of apparel ever starched. Now, this self-important collar grew older with time, and one day, while floating in the soapy waters of the washtub, he began to dream of romance and marriage. A gentleman such as I, he mused, ought not to live alone forever. As fate would have it, that very morning, he found himself beside a delicate blue garter, glimmering like a ribbon of sky in the suds. "Upon my word," cried the collar, twisting gallantly, "I have never beheld anything so slender, so graceful, so irresistibly refined. May I be so bold as to inquire your name, fair lady?" "I shall not tell you," replied the garter, blushing beneath the bubbles. "Ah, mysterious too. That only adds to your charm," continued the collar. "Might I at least ask where you reside when not bathing in this distinguished company?" But the garter, modest by nature and shy of strangers, gave no answer. "I presume," said the collar, lowering his voice, "that you are some sort of girdle? A dainty undergirdle, perhaps. How fitting, so useful, and yet so exquisitely ornamental. A perfect combination of grace and service." "You must not speak to me," said the garter firmly. "I do not recall giving you permission." "Oh, my dear," said the collar, puffing up his starch. "When beauty such as yours exists in the world, is it not encouragement enough for a gentleman to speak?" "Go away," said the garter. "You come far too close. I find it improper." "Improper!" exclaimed the collar. "Why, my dear, I am a man of standing, a fine gentleman. I own a boot jack and a hairbrush." This, of course, was quite untrue. Both belonged to his master. But the collar, alas, was a born boaster. The garter turned away, wishing the washtub would swallow her whole. "You are insufferable," she said, "and very presumptuous." The collar only laughed, sending tiny rings across the water. "Ah, modesty becomes you. he said. A little coquetry adds warmth to beauty. Before the garter could retort, the washerwoman's hands swooped down. Both were lifted from the tub, rinsed and pegged upon a line beneath the bright morning sun. There they hung, two prisoners in the breeze, until they were carried indoors, starched stiff, and laid upon the ironing board. Then came the glowing iron, hissing like a dragon. "Mistress Widow," said the caller. "Dear Mistress Widow, I feel positively warm in your company. I am changing, transforming beneath your touch. You are burning a hole straight through my heart. Oh, accept my hand. No, my seam. I propose to you." "You old rag," said the flat iron indignantly, pressing harder as if to punish him. "You miserable scrap of cloth. Do you fancy yourself worthy of a steam engine like me?" She puffed and rolled along the board as if she were indeed an iron horse upon its railway, while the collar hissed and whimpered beneath her weight. Soon after, his frayed edges were trimmed by a pair of sharp scissors. "Ah," sighed the caller in admiration. "What elegance of motion! What grace! You lift your leg, so slender, so precise. Truly, you dance divinely. I doubt any human could match your step." "I should think not," replied the scissors coldly. "You ought to be a countess," said the caller, swelling with admiration. "Were fortune mine, I would lay an estate at your feet. As it is, I have only my fine gentleman, a boot-jack, and a comb. But my devotion is priceless." "What insolence!" cried the scissors. "Is he proposing to me?" Her temper flared. Her blade snapped angrily. And in her fury, she snipped too deeply. The poor caller screamed as a piece of him fell away. "Ah, cruel beauty," he groaned. And so he was cast aside as useless. "I shall have to propose to the hairbrush next," thought the caller, refusing to surrender his vanity. One day, spying her on the dressing table, he began flatteringly. "My dear lady, what magnificent hair you have, each strand more splendid than golden thread. Tell me, have you never dreamed of being engaged?" "Why, of course," replied the brush briskly. "I am already engaged to the boot-jack." "Engaged!" cried the caller in despair. "Then there is no one left for me. Very well, I shall renounce love forever." From that hour, he pretended to despise romance, though in secret he mourned every lost opportunity. Time passed. The gentleman wore him no more. Torn, yellowed, and stiff, the collar was thrown into a bag with other rags and carried to the paper mill. There, Among heaps of linen remnants and tattered cloth lay a great company of cast-off finery, each scrap with a history, each eager to boast of better days. "I was once a lace cuff at court," said one. "I adorned the wrist of a duchess," said another. But none talked louder than the shirt collar. "I have known more love affairs than any of you," he proclaimed proudly. "No one ever left me in peace. I was irresistible, a perfect gentleman with my own boot jack and hairbrush naturally. You should have seen me when freshly starched, my corners sharp as virtue itself. Ah, my first love, a garter of the softest silk, threw herself into the wash-tub for my sake. And the widow, the flat iron, poor creature, she burned herself with passion for me. The dancer, the scissors, wounded me deeply. Love can be so cutting. Even the hairbrush lost all her hair from neglected affection. Oh, I have suffered in romance beyond measure. My conscience is heavy with broken hearts. Truly, it is time I be turned into white paper to begin anew." And indeed, that is exactly what befell him. The rags were soaked, beaten, and pulped until nothing of their former selves remained. When they emerged again, they were reborn as sheets of clean, white paper, smooth, silent, and waiting. And one of those sheets, dear reader, was the very collar himself. Thus it happens that the story you are reading now is printed upon the remains of that vain and boasting shirt collar. It is his confession and his punishment, his pride ironed flat forever. So let this be a warning to all who boast of false glories. For pride, like linen, may one day find itself tossed into the rag bag, and our deeds, every little vanity, every hidden lie, may be written plainly for the world to read, just as his were. And would it not be dreadful to wander about the earth as a piece of paper, revealing every secret deed, as did the once proud, now humble shirt collar? The flax. The flax was in full bloom. It had pretty little blue flowers, as delicate as the wings of a moth, or even more so. The sun shone, and the showers watered it. And this was just as good for the flax as it is for little children to be washed and then kissed by their mother. They look much prettier for it, and so did the flax. "People say that I look exceedingly well," said the flax, "and that I am so fine and long that I shall make a beautiful piece of linen. How fortunate I am! It makes me so happy. It is such a pleasant thing to know that something can be made of me. How the sunshine cheers me, and how sweet and refreshing is the rain. My happiness overpowers me. No one in the world can feel happier than I am." "Ah, yes, no doubt," said the fern. "But you do not know the world yet as well as I do, for my sticks are naughty." And then it sung quite mournfully, "Snip, snap, snurre, basselurre. The song is ended." "No, it is not ended," said the flax. "Tomorrow the sun will shine, or the rain descend. I feel that I am growing. I feel that I am in full blossom. I am the happiest of all creatures." Well, one day, some people came who took hold of the flax and pulled it up by the roots. This was painful. Then it was laid in water as if they intended to drown it, and after that, placed near a fire as if it were to be roasted. All this was very shocking. "We cannot expect to be happy always," said the flax. "By experiencing evil as well as good, we become wise." And certainly, there was plenty of evil in store for the flax. It was steeped and roasted and broken and combed. Indeed, it scarcely knew what was done to it. At last, it was put on the spinning wheel. Whir, whir, went the wheel so quickly that the flax could not collect its thoughts. "Well, I have been very happy," he thought in the midst of his pain, "and must be contented with the past." And contented he remained till he was put on the loom and became a beautiful piece of white linen. All the flax, even to the last stalk, was used in making this one piece. Well, this is quite wonderful. I could not have believed that I should be so favored by fortune. The fern was not wrong with its song of snip, snap, snurre, basselurre. But the song is not ended yet, I am sure. It is only just beginning. How wonderful it is that after all I have suffered, I am made something of at last. I am the luckiest person in the world, so strong and fine. And how white, and what a length. This is something different to being a mere plant and bearing flowers. Then I had no attention, nor any water unless it rained. Now I am watched and taken care of. Every morning the maid turns me over, and I have a shower bath from the watering pot every evening. Yes, and the clergyman's wife noticed me and said I was the best piece of linen in the whole parish. I cannot be happier than I am now. After some time, the linen was taken into the house, placed under the scissors, and cut and torn into pieces, and then pricked with needles. This certainly was not pleasant, but at last it was made into 12 garments of that kind which people do not like to name, and yet everybody should wear one. "See now, then," said the flax, "I have become something of importance. This was my destiny. It is quite a blessing. Now I shall be of some use in the world, as everyone ought to be. It is the only way to be happy. I am now divided into 12 pieces, and yet we are all one and the same in the whole dozen. It is most extraordinary good fortune. Years passed away, and at last the linen was so worn it could scarcely hold together. "It must end very soon," said the pieces to each other. "We would gladly have held together a little longer, but it is useless to expect impossibilities." And at length they fell into rags and tatters, and thought it was all over with them, for they were torn to shreds, and steeped in water, and made into a pulp, and dried, and they knew not what besides, till all at once they found themselves beautiful white paper. "Well now, this is a surprise. A glorious surprise too," said the paper. "I am now finer than ever, and I shall be written upon, and who can tell what fine things I may have written upon me. This is wonderful luck." And sure enough, the most beautiful stories and poetry were written upon it, and only once was there a blot, which was very fortunate. Then people heard the stories and poetry read, and it made them wiser and better, for all that was written had a good and sensible meaning, and a great blessing was contained in the words on this paper. "I never imagined anything like this," said the paper, "when I was only a little blue flower growing in the fields. How could I fancy that I should ever be the means of bringing knowledge and joy to man? I cannot understand it myself, and yet it is really so. Heaven knows that I have done nothing myself, but what I was obliged to do with my weak powers for my own preservation. And yet I have been promoted from one joy and honor to another. Each time I think that the song is ended, and then something higher and better begins for me. I suppose now I shall be sent on my travels about the world, so that people may read me. It cannot be otherwise. Indeed, it is more than probable, for I have more splendid thoughts written upon me than I had pretty flowers in olden times. I am happier than ever." But the paper did not go on its travels. It was sent to the printer, and all the words written upon it were set up in type to make a book, or rather, many hundreds of books. For so many more persons could derive pleasure and profit from a printed book than from the written paper. And if the paper had been sent around the world, it would have been worn out before it had got half through its journey. "This is certainly the wisest plan," said the written paper. "I really did not think of that. I shall remain at home and be held in honor, like some old grandfather, as I really am to all these new books. They will do some good. I could not have wandered about as they do. Yet he who wrote all this has looked at me, as every word flowed from his pen upon my surface. I am the most honored of all." Then the paper was tied in a bundle with other papers and thrown into a tub that stood in the wash-house. "After work, it is well to rest," said the paper, "and a very good opportunity to collect one's thoughts. Now I am able, for the first time, to think of my real condition, and to know oneself is true progress. What will be done with me now, I wonder? No doubt I shall still go forward. I have always progressed hitherto, as I know quite well. Now it happened one day that all the paper in the tub was taken out and laid on the hearth to be burnt. People said it could not be sold at the shop to wrap up butter and sugar, because it had been written upon. The children in the house stood round the stove, for they wanted to see the paper burn, because it flamed up so prettily. And afterwards, among the ashes, so many red sparks could be seen, running one after the other, here and there, as quick as the wind. They called it seeing the children come out of school, and the last spark was the schoolmaster. They often thought the last spark had come, and one would cry, "There goes the schoolmaster." But the next moment, another spark would appear, shining so beautifully. How they would like to know where the sparks all went to. Perhaps we shall find out someday, but we don't know now. The whole bundle of paper had been placed on the fire and was soon alight. "Ugh!" cried the paper as it burst into a bright flame. Ugh! It was certainly very pleasant to be burning. But when the whole was wrapped in flames, the flames mounted up into the air, higher than the flax had ever been able to raise its little blue flower, and they glistened as the white linen never could have glistened. All the written letters became quite red in a moment, and all the words and thoughts turned to fire. "Now I am mounting straight up to the sun," said a voice in the flames, and it was as if 1,000 voices echoed the words, and the flames darted up through the chimney and went out at the top. Then a number of tiny beings, as many in number as the flowers on the flax had been, and invisible to mortal eyes, floated above them. They were even lighter and more delicate than the flowers from which they were born. And as the flames were extinguished, and nothing remained of the paper but black ashes, these little beings danced upon it, and whenever they touched it, bright red sparks appeared. "The children are all out of school, and the schoolmaster was the last of all," said the children. It was good fun, and they sang over the dead ashes. Snip, snap, snurr, bassalure. The song is ended. But the little invisible beings said, "The song is never ended. The most beautiful is yet to come." But the children could neither hear nor understand this, nor should they, for children must not know everything. The phoenix bird in the garden of paradise Before sorrow had ever touched the wind, there grew a rose bush beneath the tree of knowledge. Its blossoms were pale as dawn and deep as flame. And in the heart of the first rose there stirred a trembling spark of life. From that sacred flower was born a bird, light as breath, radiant as the morning star. His wings caught the glow of the sun before the sun was named. His flight was like a silver lightning over the quiet dew of Eden. The angels smiled to see him rise, for his song was woven from the same harmony that bound the spheres together. A hymn without words, a melody that could make the rivers pause in their running. But then came the hour of disobedience, the fateful hand of Eve reaching toward the forbidden fruit. The air trembled. The garden fell silent. When the first bite was taken, the light of innocence was dimmed, and Adam and Eve were cast forth from the gates of paradise. As the flaming cherub drew his sword to guard the way, one single spark leapt from its edge and fell into the nest of that divine bird. The flame rose high. The leaves of the rosebush curled and darkened, and in a breath of fire, the bird was gone. Yet not all was lost. In the ashes of that holy blaze lay a single red egg, pulsing faintly with the memory of song. From it, trembling and glorious, rose a new creature, the phoenix, the only one of his kind. His feathers shimmered like molten gold. His eyes were the color of dawn seen through tears. The legends tell that he flew eastward to Arabia, where in solitude he built his nest upon the frankincense tree. There, once in every 100 years, when the time of renewal came, he gathered spices and sweet bark around him, sang his last song to the dying sun, and surrendered himself again to the fire. Out of the crimson egg left in his ashes, a new phoenix was always born, forever alone, yet forever reborn. He is the spirit of undying beauty, the flame that never tires. Around us, he flutters, still, invisible but present, swift as light, clothed in every color of the heart. When a mother bends over her sleeping child, he perches unseen upon the pillow, fanning the infant's dreams with the light of heaven. When he passes through a humble room, the shadows brighten, the air grows warm, and even the violets upon the table breathe a sweeter fragrance. But the phoenix is not the bird of Arabia alone. He journeys through all the worlds of men. In the north, where the aurora shivers like living glass, he rides the green fires over Lapland's snow, leaving feathers of light upon the frozen sky. In Greenland's brief and tender summer, he hops among the yellow Arctic flowers, and his song mingles with the sighing of the ice. Beneath the copper mountains of Fablan, where miners kneel in the glow of their lamps, he descends as a dusty moth, hovering over a worn hymn book opened on a calloused knee. Along the sacred waters of the Ganges, he drifts upon a lotus leaf. And when a Hindu maiden looks into the current and beholds his glimmer, her eyes brighten like twin stars awakening at dusk. The phoenix bird. Dost thou not know him? The bird of paradise, the immortal swan of song. Through every age, he takes a different form. On the ancient stage of Thespis, he was the chattering raven that mocked and wept with the crowd, his black wings glistening with wine and sorrow. Over the frozen harp of Iceland, his beak, red as embers, swept the strings into song. On Shakespeare's shoulder, he rested in the guise of Odin's raven, whispering softly into the poet's ear the secret word, immortality. At the minstrel's feast in the halls of Wartburg, he fluttered unseen between goblet and lyre, leaving behind a spark in every verse. And dost thou not know him still? He sang for thee the song of freedom, the Marseillaise that set nations aflame, and thou kissed the pen that fell from his wing. He came to thee clothed in the radiance of paradise. But perhaps thou didst turn away, choosing instead the tinsel sparrow who chirped of trifles and fashion. Yet the phoenix waited still, patient as dawn, for his song is eternal, and his silence divine. The bird of paradise, ever reborn, ever burning, dies in flame and is renewed in flame. His painted likeness, framed in gold, adorns the halls of kings. But the living bird wanders unnoticed through the streets of the poor, alighting where there is love, hope, or faith enough to receive him. Men call him a myth, a dream, a fable of Arabia. But those who listen with their hearts have heard the faint rustle of his wings at dusk, and felt the warmth of his passing in a world grown cold. For once, long ago, in the garden of paradise, beneath the tree of knowledge, and within the heart of the first rose, he was kissed by the breath of God. And in that holy moment, he was given his true name. Not Phoenix, but poetry. The undying spirit that burns, perishes, and rises again in every age, in every soul that dares to dream. There is a difference. It was in the month of May. The wind was still cold, but spring had come, said the trees and the bushes, the fields and the meadows. Everywhere, flowers were budding into blossom. Even the hedges were alive with them. Here spring spoke about herself. It spoke from a little apple tree, from which hung a single branch so fresh and blooming, and fairly weighed down by a glorious mass of rosy buds just ready to open. Now this branch knew how lovely it was, for that knowledge lies in the leaf as well as in the flesh. so it wasn't a bit surprised when one day a grand carriage stopped in the road beside it, and the young countess in the carriage said that this apple branch was the most beautiful she had ever seen. It was spring itself in its loveliest form. So she broke off the apple branch and carried it in her own dainty hand, shading it from the sun with her silk parasol as they drove on to her castle, in which there were lofty halls and beautifully decorated rooms. Fleecy white curtains fluttered at its open windows, and there were many shining, transparent vases full of beautiful flowers. In one of these vases, which looked as if it were carved of new fallen snow, she placed the apple branch among fresh green beech leaves, a lovely sight indeed. And so it happened that the apple branch grew proud, and that's quite human. All sorts of people passed through the rooms, and according to their rank, expressed their admiration in different ways. Some said too much, some said too little, and some said nothing at all. And the apple branch began to realize that there were differences in people as well as in plants. Some are used for nourishment, some are for ornament, and some you could very well do without, thought the apple branch. From its position at the open window, the apple branch could look down over the gardens and meadows below, and consider the differences among the flowers and plants beneath. Some were rich, some were poor, and some were very poor. "Miserable, rejected plants," said the apple branch. "There is a difference indeed. It's quite proper and just that distinctions should be made. Yet how unhappy they must feel, if indeed a creature like that is capable of feeling anything, as I and my equals do. But it must be that way. Otherwise, everybody would be treated as though they were just alike." And the apple branch looked down with especial pity on one kind of flower that grew everywhere in meadows and ditches. They were much too common ever to be gathered into bouquets. They could be found between the paving stones. They shot up like the rankest and most worthless of weeds. They were dandelions, but people have given them the ugly name, the devil's milk pails. "Poor, wretched outcasts," said the apple branch. "I suppose you can't help being as common as you are, and having such a vulgar name. It's the same with plants as with men. There must be a difference." "A difference?" repeated the sunbeam, as it kissed the apple branch. But it kissed the golden devil's milk pails, too. And all the other sunbeams did the same, kissing all the flowers equally, poor as well as rich. The apple branch had never thought about our Lord's infinite love for everything that lives and moves in Him, had never thought how much that it is good and beautiful can lie hidden, but still not be forgotten. And that, too, was human. But the sunbeam, the ray of light, knew better. You don't see very clearly. You are not very far-sighted. Who are these outcast flowers that you pity so much? Those devil's milk pails down there, replied the apple branch. Nobody ever ties them up in bouquets. They're trodden underfoot because there are too many of them. And when they go to seed, they fly about along the road like little bits of wool and hang on people's clothes. They're just weeds. I suppose there must be weeds too. But I'm certainly happy and grateful that I'm not like one of them. Now, a whole flock of children ran out into the meadow to play. The youngest of them was so tiny that he had to be carried by the others. When they set him down in the grass among the golden blossoms, he laughed and gurgled with joy, kicked his little legs, rolled over and over, and plucked only the yellow dandelions. These he kissed in innocent delight. The bigger children broke off the flowers of the dandelions and joined the hollow stalks, link by link, into chains. First, they would make one for a necklace, then a longer one to hang across the shoulders and around the waist, and finally, one to go around their heads. It was a beautiful wreath of splendid green links and chains, but the biggest of the children carefully gathered the stalks that had gone to seed, those loose, aerial, woolly blossoms, those wonderfully perfect balls of dainty white plumes, and held them to their lips, trying to blow away all the white feathers with one breath. Granny had told them that whoever could do that would receive new clothes before the year was out. The poor, despised dandelion was considered quite a prophet on such occasions. "Now do you see?" asked the sunbeam. "Do you see its beauty and power?" "Oh, it's all right for children," replied the apple branch. Now an old woman came into the meadow. She stooped and dug up the roots of the dandelion with a blunt knife that had lost its handle. Some of the roots she would roast instead of coffee berries. Others she would sell to the apothecary to be used as drugs. "Beauty is something higher than this," said the apple branch. "Only the chosen few can really be allowed into the kingdom of the beautiful. There's as much difference between plants as between men." Then the sunbeam spoke of the infinite love of the Creator for all his creatures, for everything that has life, and of the equal distribution of all things in time and eternity. "That's just your opinion," replied the apple branch. Now some people came into the room, and among them was the young countess who had placed the apple branch in the transparent vase. She was carrying a flower, or whatever it was, that was protected by 3 or 4 large leaves around it, like a cap, so that no breath of air or gust of wind could injure it. She carried it more carefully and tenderly than she had the apple branch when she had brought it to the castle. Very gently she removed the leaves, and then the apple branch could see what she carried. It was a delicate, feathery crown of starry seeds borne by the despised dandelion. This was what she had plucked so carefully and carried so tenderly, so that no single one of the loose, dainty, feathered arrows that rounded out its downy form should be blown away. There it was, whole and perfect. With delight, she admired the beautiful form, the airy lightness, the marvelous mechanism of a thing that was destined so soon to be scattered by the wind. "Look how wonderfully beautiful our Lord made this," she cried. "I'll paint it together with the apple branch. Everybody thinks it is so extremely beautiful, but this poor flower is lovely too. It has received as much from our Lord in another way. They are very different, yet both are children in the kingdom of the beautiful." The sunbeam kissed the poor dandelion, and then kissed the blooming apple branch, whose petals seemed to blush a deeper red. The loveliest rose in the world. There once lived a mighty queen whose palace stood amidst terraces of marble and gardens that seemed to breathe with eternal spring. Every path was lined with blossoms from every corner of the world, from far eastern orchids that smelled of moonlight, to desert lilies that bloomed only beneath starlit silence. Yet above all these wonders, the queen's heart belonged to the rose. She loved it in all its forms. The humble hedge-rose that perfumed the hedgerows with apple sweetness, and the proud Provence rose whose petals blushed like dawn upon snow. Roses climbed the pillars of her galleries, trailed over the archways, and framed her windows with living garlands. They spread their fragrance through the corridors and even upon the ceilings of her great halls, where the air was always heavy with their perfume. But though her palace overflowed with life and beauty, care and sorrow had taken up residence within those glittering walls. The queen, so adored by her people, so blessed in riches, lay upon a couch of silk, pale and still as a fallen petal. The physicians, wise in all the arts of healing, could offer no remedy. "Her end draws near," they whispered. Yet one among them, the eldest and most learned, lifted his head and spoke with calm conviction. "There is still one hope. If we could bring to her the loveliest rose in all the world, one that embodies the purest, brightest love, and if her eyes behold it before they close forever, she shall not die." Then word went out across kingdoms and seas. Messengers galloped through snow and storm. Sailors braved tempest and tide. From every garden came those who bore roses, some golden as sunrise, others red as coral, others white as frost. Yet none of these could save her. They were beautiful, but not that rose, not the flower born in the garden of love itself. And so poets and priests, mothers and maidens, each offered their thought of where the truest love might bloom. The poets sang, for they had dreamed of this rose all their lives. They wrote verses filled with longing and faith, but when their blossoms were brought before the queen, their fragrance faded like sighs in the air. "No one has found it," said the wise man sadly. "No one has named the place where it grows in its full glory. It is not the rose that sprang from the tomb of Romeo and Juliet, though that flower is nourished by tears of eternal devotion. It is not the bloom that blossomed upon Walberg's grave, though holy legends sing of it. Nor is it the crimson flower born from the blood of Winkelried, the hero who died for his country. Noble though such blood be, sacred though such sacrifice remains, the color of courage cannot equal the hue of divine love, neither does it grow in the secret gardens of science, where lonely seekers spend sleepless nights, sacrificing youth to wrest miracles from nature's hand. No, the loveliest rose must spring from a soil far deeper, from the heart. Then among the courtiers stepped a gentle mother, her face bright with faith. In her arms she carried her little child, whose laughter seemed to scatter sunlight through the chamber. "I know where it blooms," she said softly. "I have seen the loveliest rose. It opens upon the cheeks of my child when, after peaceful sleep, he wakes and smiles at me with innocent love. That smile, that trust, is the purest rose that heaven allows to grow on earth." The wise man smiled tenderly. "It is indeed a lovely rose," he said, "and its scent is holy. But there is one lovelier still." Then a woman stepped forward, her voice trembling. "I have seen it too," she said, "and no rose on earth can match it. It was pale, white as a petal, kissed by moonlight, and I saw it upon the cheeks of our queen herself. For through one long, sorrowful night, she carried her sick child in her arms. She laid aside her golden crown, forgot her rank and majesty, and wept over her little one. She kissed him, prayed for him, and held him until dawn broke. That white rose was born of a mother's grief, pure as snow upon an altar." The wise man bowed his head. "Holy indeed is that rose," he murmured. "It is watered by tears of love and pain, and its beauty is beyond mortal art. Yet even that is not the one we seek." Silence fell. The lamps flickered. Outside, the garden roses drooped, as if they too waited. At last, an old bishop lifted his staff and spoke. "I have seen the rose," said he, "at the Lord's table. It shone brighter than gold, for I saw a young maiden kneel before the altar and renew the vows of her baptism. Upon her cheeks glowed both red and white, the roses of purity and faith united. Her eyes were lifted to heaven, with love unshadowed, her soul radiant as an angel's. In that moment, I beheld the expression of the highest love on earth. Blessed be she," said the wise man reverently. "Yet still, none has brought the loveliest rose in the world." Then the door creaked open, and into the chamber came a child, the queen's own little son. His small hands held a great book bound in velvet, clasped with silver. Tears sparkled on his cheeks like dew upon a morning flower. He climbed to his mother's side and cried, "Mother, listen to what I have read." And he opened the holy book and began to read with trembling voice the words of him who gave his life for all mankind, even for those yet unborn. "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." As he spoke, a gentle color, soft and roseate, returned to the queen's cheeks. Her eyes, once dim, grew bright with wonder, for from the pages of that sacred book she beheld, not with mortal sight, but with the vision of the soul, a rose unfolding, radiant beyond all earthly bloom. Its petals glowed with divine light. Its fragrance filled the room with peace. It was the image of him who hung upon the cross, shedding his blood in love that knows no end. "I see it," whispered the queen. "Yes, now I see the loveliest rose in all the world, the rose that never fades, the rose of eternal love." And as she gazed upon it, strength flowed back into her heart. Her pain was lifted, her breath came gently, like the sigh of spring wind among blossoms. The wise man bowed low and said softly, "He who beholds this rose shall never die." Outside, in the royal gardens, the other roses seemed to bow their heads. The air grew fragrant, as if heaven itself had breathed upon the earth. And though the petals of the worldly flowers fell with the turning of seasons, the queen's rose, the rose of divine love, bloomed forever in her soul, shining with the promise that love stronger than death is the truest flower of all. In 1,000 years, yes, in 1,000 years, the thought echoes like prophecy through the corridors of time. People will soar through the heavens, not upon wings of feathers, but on wings of steam and lightning, cleaving the air as easily as ships now glide upon the sea. Across vast oceans They shall pass in a single day, their flying vessels tracing bright lines of fire through the firmament. The young citizens of the New World, restless, daring, and filled with the hunger of discovery, will no longer be confined by the limits of the Atlantic. They shall come as pilgrims to the Old World, to Europe, the cradle of their ancestors, seeking the ghosts of empires long fallen, the ruins of cities that once ruled the earth. They shall come as we once went eastward, to gaze upon the fading glories of Asia, to walk where kings knelt and prophets spoke. In 1,000 years they will come. The Thames will still flow, though its banks will have forgotten London's pride. The Danube and the Rhine will still roll their noble waters toward the sea, whispering of vanished courts and silent cathedrals. Mont Blanc shall rise eternal, its summit crowned with snow as when Caesar dreamed of conquest, and the northern lights will still shimmer above the sleeping lands of the north. But the generations of men, proud, brief, and innumerable, will have turned to dust. The mighty of our moment will rest nameless beneath the very hills they once owned, while above them some future merchant, master of those fields, will sit on a marble bench and gaze across the golden waves of his harvest, unaware that the bones of forgotten kings lie deep beneath his feet. To Europe, cry the young sons and daughters of America, their voices bright with wonder. To the land of our ancestors, the land of monuments, of poetry, of dreams, to Europe. And from the shining platforms of crystal towers, the ships of the air ascend, vast, gleaming structures of metal and magnetism, pulsing with invisible power. The voyage is swift, almost instantaneous. Beneath them lies the boundless ocean, dark and gleaming, yet bridged by a silent thread, the electromagnetic wire that unites the continents and has already announced their coming. The coast of Ireland appears first, a green shadow rising from the mist. But the passengers still sleep in their cushioned cabins, rocked gently by the steady hum of machinery. They will not be awakened until the vessel hovers over England, that ancient island, once the heart of the world's dominion. There, they will first set foot on European soil, the land of Shakespeare, as the learned call it, or as others say, the land of machines and politics, for even its poetry once marched in iron rhythm. They linger only a day. The travelers of this future age cannot linger long. Time itself has grown too precious. One day, for all of England and Scotland, for the castles, the cathedrals, the graves of kings, and the mists that once inspired 1,000 poets. Then onward they fly, descending into the deep undersea tunnel that links Britain to France, the land of Charlemagne and Napoleon, of Molière and Pascal, of countless unnamed geniuses yet to be born. In Paris, still, after 1,000 years, the radiant heart of Europe, their voices rise in praise of the heroes, scientists, and poets of the future, whose names, unknown to us, shall one day illuminate the world. Onward, still, over the country of Columbus, of Cortez, and of Calderon. Spain gleams beneath them like a tapestry of gold and shadow, her valleys blooming, her dark-eyed daughters singing the same old ballads of the Cid and the Alhambra. Then, across the azure sea to Italy, once the realm of mighty Rome. But Rome has fallen at last. The Campagna lies deserted, silent under the sun. Only a single fragment of stone remains, pointed out as the last remnant of St. Peter's. Even that, some say, is not authentic. A ruin of a ruin, the memory of a memory. The voyagers pass to Greece, the mother of beauty and thought. They sleep a night in the grand hotel upon Mount Olympus, built where once the gods themselves were said to dwell. In the morning, they write their names upon the marble walls, a modern echo of immortality, and continue eastward to the Bosphorus. There, in the place once called Byzantium, they pause a few hours. The golden domes and minarets have vanished. The legends of the sultans are only stories whispered by old fishermen, mending their nets where once the palaces of the caliphs glittered above the strait. Over the broad Danube they glide, gazing down upon the ruins of mighty cities unknown to us, cities that will one day rise, blaze in glory, and perish before their coming. Sometimes the caravan descends, resting a while upon those future lands, then ascends again, vanishing like a silver cloud in the sky. Below lies Germany, once a lattice of railways and rivers, where Luther's words shook kingdoms, where Goethe sang, and where Mozart reigned in harmony. New names now shine there, unknown to us, but bright in their age. Thinkers, painters, discoverers who have reforged the soul of Europe. One day is given to see it all. One single day to grasp the labor of 1,000 years. Then northward they turn, to the lands of Orsted and Linnaeus, to Norway, where the spirits of the ancient heroes still dwell among the fjords, and to Iceland, the island of fire and frost. The geysers no longer erupt. Hekla sleeps in silence, but the rocks still gleam in the eternal surf, steadfast, enduring, crowned forever with legend and song. There is, indeed, much to be seen in Europe, says the young American, closing his travel journal with satisfaction. And we have seen it all of it, in 7 days, precisely as the great traveler of our century advised in his immortal book, How to See All Europe in a Week. He smiles, content and a little weary, as the ship of the air turns westward once more, its silver wings catching the crimson of the setting sun, carrying mankind, still restless, still curious, back across the ocean toward tomorrow. The Swan's Nest. Between the restless waves of the Baltic and the storm-kissed waters of the North Sea, there lies an ancient cradle of white feathers, an old swan's nest, resting upon the green and golden marshlands of the north. There, beneath drifting mists and under skies that never forget the light of dawn, swans were born, proud, pure, and eternal. And from that nest have come those who shall never die in the memory of humankind. In the days when the world was still young, and the air smelled of iron and pine, a great flock of swans rose into the blue. They spread their wings like banners of snow and turned toward the south, their plumage flashing like swords in the sun. Across the high Alps they flew, where the air was thin and sharp, and the mountains glittered like frozen waves. At last, they came to rest upon the wide green plains near Milan, fertile, sun-warmed, and bright with rivers and vineyards. There they settled, and men called them the Lombards, the swans of the south, who carried with them the northern courage and the cool purity of the snows they had left behind. Another flight turned eastward, their feathers catching the dawn light as they soared above the endless forests and seas. These were the proud and loyal swans who found their resting place in Byzantium, that city of gold and domes, where empires dreamed and kings bent their heads beneath heaven's will. There, beside the emperor's throne, they made their home, guardians of majesty, shields of loyalty, their wings spread wide above the ruler of men, gleaming like silver in the light of 1,000 candles. And they were named the Varangians, the faithful ones whose courage stood between the throne and its enemies. Yet not all who came from the northern nest brought comfort. On the shores of France, there rose a cry of fear, sharp and desperate as the wail of the wind before a storm. The blood-red light of burning villages glowed beneath the wings of the wild swans that descended from the north. With fire in their eyes and steel in their talons, they came. The Northmen, whose ships were like floating dragons, and whose oars bit the sea with hunger. And the people prayed, "Heaven deliver us from the wrath of the north, from the swans of storm and flame." Across the green fields and cliffs of England. The Danish swan stood proud and bright beside the open shore. Upon his head he bore the crown of 3 kingdoms, and in his grasp was the scepter of gold that ruled over sea and land. His voice rolled like thunder over the isles, and his banner cast a shadow long as the coast itself. On the wild Pomeranian coasts, where the forests met the tide, the heathen bent their knees before the sign of the cross, for the Danish swans had come again. This time not as raiders, but as bearers of faith. The banner of the white Christ waved beside the drawn sword. The swan's wings, once darkened by war, now gleamed with the pale fire of redemption. That was long ago, you say, the ancient times. Yes, the centuries have flown as the swans once flew, yet the nest between the seas remains. And from it, through each age, the world has seen new wings unfold, new songs arise. In later days, when the mists of ignorance hung over the earth and men still groped for truth in the twilight of reason, another swan rose from the old nest. His wings shone with strange and holy light, not the light of battle nor the light of faith, but the light of knowledge, of stars and heavens. With every beat of his wings, the darkness broke apart. The firmament itself drew nearer to mortal eyes. That swan was Tycho Brahe, who read the language of the stars as if they were written for him alone. Through his eyes, the sky became a mirror of divine order, and men saw that the world was vast beyond imagining, yet ruled by law, by beauty, by the same quiet hand that had shaped the first feather on the first swan. Yes, that was then, you say again. But what of our own time? Listen, the wings have not fallen silent. We have seen swan after swan rise into the blue, each bearing a gift for the world. One let his wings glide over the golden strings of a harp, and the sound flowed northward like sunlight through a frozen forest. Mountains rose higher beneath the melody. Pines whispered again of the old gods and heroes. The spirits of Norway's valleys stirred from their sleep. The songs of ancient days lived anew in that music, and the hearts of men remembered that they too had wings. Another swan came and struck his mighty wings upon the marble of the earth. The rock trembled, cracked, and burst, and from within came forth forms of beauty that had waited centuries for the touch of light. They stepped into the day, radiant and free, the children of stone reborn, and the people of many lands lifted up their heads, astonished by these new wonders, for they saw in them not just sculpture, but revelation. the soul of man made visible. A third swan wove threads not of silk or gold, but of thought itself. He spun them from land to land, from ocean to ocean, until the world was bound by an invisible web. Upon those shining cords, words could fly swifter than the wind, bearing love, knowledge, and the news of nations. His song was the song of connection, the heartbeat of the earth made one. And still the nest remains, ancient yet alive. The Lord of heaven, it is said, has a tender love for that nest between the Baltic and the North Sea, for it is not merely a home of birds, but a symbol of spirit, of courage, endurance, and the strange divine fire that cannot die. When storms gather and black wings of war descend to strike it down, the young swans, untested, unblooded, rise to its defense. They form a circle around their cradle of reeds and wind. Their breasts are pierced, their feathers reddened, yet they do not flee. With wings and claws, they strike against the invaders, and their cries mingle with the roar of thunder. They fight not only for the nest, but for all that it means: the memory of flight, the dream of freedom, the promise that beauty and faith will rise again from ruin. Centuries will pass, empires will crumble into dust, and new ones will grow where old ones stood. The languages of men will change, the cities will fade, and even the stars themselves may wander. But from the northern nest, the swans will still rise, proud, white, and luminous. They will fly across oceans of time, and men will see them and remember that they, too, are born of the same air, the same longing for the sky. And one day, far in the future, when the last echoes of battle and the last songs of sorrow have quieted over the earth, there will come a final swan. His wings will gleam with all the light of those who came before him. His voice will hold the memory of every song. He will rise alone into the eternal blue, and the world will look up in wonder. Then, and only then, will it be said in spirit and in truth, "This is the last swan, the last song from the swan's nest." The old gravestone, in a house with a large courtyard, in a provincial town, at that time of the year in which people say the evenings are growing longer, a family circle were gathered together at their old home. A lamp burned on the table, although the weather was mild and warm, and the long curtains hung down before the open windows, and without the moon shone brightly in the dark blue sky. But they were not talking of the moon, but of a large old stone that lay below in the courtyard, not very far from the kitchen door. The maids often laid the clean copper saucepans and kitchen vessels on this stone, that they might dry in the sun, and the children were fond of playing on it. It was, in fact, an old gravestone. "Yes," said the master of the house, "I believe the stone came from the graveyard of the old church of the convent, which was pulled down, and the pulpit, the monuments, and the gravestones sold. My father bought the latter. Most of them were cut in two and used for paving stones, but that one stone was preserved whole and laid in the courtyard. Anyone can see that it is a gravestone," said the eldest of the children. "The representation of an hourglass and part of the figure of an angel can still be traced, but the inscription beneath is quite worn out, excepting the name Preben and a large S close by it, and a little farther down the name of Martha can be easily read, but nothing more, and even that cannot be seen unless it has been raining, or when we have washed the stone." "Dear me, how singular! Why, that must be the gravestone of Preben, Swan, and his wife." The old man who said this looked old enough to be the grandfather of all present in the room. "Yes," he continued, "these people were among the last who were buried in the churchyard of the old convent. They were a very worthy old couple. I can remember them well in the days of my boyhood. Everyone knew them, and they were esteemed by all. They were the oldest residents in the town, and people said they possessed a ton of gold. Yet they were always very plainly dressed in the coarsest stuff, but with linen of the purest whiteness. Preben and Martha were a fine old couple, and when they both sat on the bench, at the top of the steep stone steps, in front of their house, with the branches of the linden tree waving above them, and nodded in a gentle, friendly way to passers-by, it really made one feel quite happy. They were very good to the poor. They fed them and clothed them, and in their benevolence there was judgment as well as true Christianity. The old woman died first. That day is still quite vividly before my eyes. I was a little boy and had accompanied my father to the old man's house. Martha had fallen into the sleep of death just as we arrived there. The corpse lay in a bedroom near to the one in which we sat, and the old man was in great distress and weeping like a child. He spoke to my father and to a few neighbors who were there of how lonely he should feel now she was gone, and how good and true she, his dead wife, had been during the number of years that they had passed through life together, and how they had become acquainted and learnt to love each other. I was, as I have said, a boy, and only stood by and listened to what the others said. But it filled me with a strange emotion to listen to the old man, and to watch how the color rose in his cheeks as he spoke of the days of their courtship, of how beautiful she was, and how many little tricks he had been guilty of, that he might meet her. And then he talked of his wedding day, and his eyes brightened, and he seemed to be carried back by his words to that joyful time. And yet there she was, lying in the next room, dead, an old woman, and he was an old man speaking of the days of hope, long passed away. Ah, well, so it is. Then I was but a child, and now I am old as Preben Swan then was. Time passes away, and all things changed. I can remember quite well the day on which she was buried, and how old Preben walked close behind the coffin. A few years before this time, the old couple had had their gravestone prepared, with an inscription and their names, but not the date. In the evening, the stone was taken to the churchyard and laid on the grave. A year later, it was taken up, that old Preben might be laid by the side of his wife. They did not leave behind them wealth. They left behind them far less than people had believed they possessed. What there was went to families distantly related to them, of whom, till then, no one had ever heard. The old house, with its balcony of wickerwork, and the bench at the top of the high steps, under the lime tree, was considered, by the road inspectors, too old and rotten to be left standing. Afterwards, when the same fate befell the convent church, and the graveyard was destroyed, the gravestone of Preben and Martha, like everything else, was sold to whoever would buy it. And so it happened that this stone was not cut in two, as many others had been, but now lies in the courtyard below, a scouring block for the maids, and a playground for the children. The paved street now passes over the resting place of old Preben and his wife. No one thinks of them any more now. And the old man who had spoken of all this shook his head mournfully and said, "Forgotten? Ah, yes, everything will be forgotten." And then the conversation turned on other matters. But the youngest child in the room, a boy with large, earnest eyes, mounted upon a chair behind the window curtains and looked out into the yard, where the moon was pouring a flood of light on the old gravestone. The stone that had always appeared to him so dull and flat, but which lay there now like a great leaf out of a book of history. All that the boy had heard of old Preben and his wife seemed clearly defined on the stone, and as he gazed on it and glanced at the clear, bright moon shining in the pure air, it was as if the light of God's countenance beamed over his beautiful world. "Forgotten, everything will be forgotten," still echoed through the room. And in the same moment, an invisible spirit whispered to the heart of the boy, preserve carefully the seed that has been entrusted to thee, that it may grow and thrive. Guard it well. Through thee, my child, shall the obliterated inscription on the old, weather-beaten gravestone go forth to future generations in clear golden characters. The old pair shall again wander through the streets, arm in arm, or sit with their fresh, healthy cheeks on the bench under the lime tree, and smile and nod at rich and poor. The seed of this hour shall ripen in the course of years into a beautiful poem. The beautiful and the good are never forgotten. They live always in story or in song. The story of the year. It was near the end of January, and a terrible fall of snow was pelting down and whirling through the streets and lanes. The windows were plastered with snow on the outside. Snow fell in masses from the roofs. Everyone seemed in a great hurry. They ran, they flew, fell into each other's arms, holding fast for a moment, as long as they could stand safely. Coaches and horses looked as if they had been frosted with sugar. The footmen stood with their backs against the carriages so as to turn their faces from the wind. The foot passengers kept within the shelter of the carriages, which could only move slowly on in the deep snow. At last the storm abated, and a narrow path was swept clean in front of the houses. When two persons met in this path, they stood still, for neither liked to take the first step on one side into the deep snow to let the other pass him. There they stood, silent and motionless, till at last, as if by tacit consent, they each sacrificed a leg and buried it in the deep snow. Towards evening, the weather became calm. The sky, cleared from the snow, looked more lofty and transparent, while the stars shone with new brightness and purity. The frozen snow crackled underfoot and was quite firm enough to bear the sparrows, who hopped upon it in the morning dawn. They searched for food in the path which had been swept, but there was very little for them, and they were terribly cold. "Tweet, tweet," said one to another. "They call this a new year, but I think it is worse than the last. We might just as well have kept the old year. I'm quite unhappy, and I have a right to be so." "Yes, you have. And yet the people ran about and fired off guns to usher in the new year," said a little shivering sparrow. They threw things against the doors and were quite beside themselves with joy, because the old year had disappeared. I was glad too, for I expected we should have some warm days, but my hopes have come to nothing. It freezes harder than ever. I think mankind have made a mistake in reckoning time. "That they have," said a third, an old sparrow with a white poll. they have something they call a calendar. It's an invention of their own, and everything must be arranged according to it. But it won't do. When spring comes, then the year begins. It is the voice of nature, and I reckon by that. But when will spring come? Asked the others. It will come when the stork returns, but he is very uncertain. And here in the town, no one knows anything about it. In the country, they have more knowledge. Shall we fly away there and wait? We shall be nearer to spring then, certainly. That may be all very well, said another sparrow, who had been hopping about for a long time, chirping, but not saying anything of consequence. But I have found a few comforts here in town, which, I'm afraid, I should miss out in the country. Here in this neighborhood, there lives a family of people who have been so sensible as to place 3 or 4 flower pots against the wall in the courtyard, so that the openings are all turned inward, and the bottom of each points outward. In the latter, a hole has been cut large enough for me to fly in and out. I and my husband have built a nest in one of these pots, and all our young ones, who have now flown away, were brought up there. The people who live there, of course, made the whole arrangement that they might have the pleasure of seeing us, or they would not have done it. It pleased them also to strew breadcrumbs for us, and so we have food, and may consider ourselves provided for. So I think my husband and I will stay where we are, although we are not very happy, but we shall stay. And we will fly into the country, said the others, to see if spring is coming. And away they flew. In the country, it was really winter, a few degrees colder than in the town. The sharp winds blew over the snow-covered fields. The farmer, wrapped in warm clothing, sat in his sleigh and beat his arms across his chest to keep off the cold. The whip lay on his lap. The horses ran till they smoked. The snow crackled. The sparrows hopped about in the wheel ruts and shivered, crying, "Tweet, tweet. When will spring come? It is very long in coming." "Very long indeed," sounded over the field from the nearest snow-covered hill. It might have been the echo which people heard, or perhaps the words of that wonderful old man who sat high on a heap of snow, regardless of wind or weather. He was all in white. He had on a peasant's coarse white coat of frieze. He had long white hair, a pale face, and large, clear blue eyes. "Who is that old man?" asked the sparrows. "I know who he is," said an old raven, who sat on the fence and was condescending enough to acknowledge that we are all equal in the sight of heaven, even as little birds. And therefore he talked with the sparrows and gave them the information they wanted. "I know who the old man is," he said. "It is winter, the old man of last year. He is not dead yet, as the calendar says, but acts as guardian to little Prince Spring, who is coming. Winter rules here still. Ugh, the cold makes you shiver, little ones, does it not? There, did I not tell you so? Said the smallest of the sparrows. The calendar is only an invention of man, and is not arranged according to nature. They should leave these things to us. We are created so much more clever than they are. 1 week passed, and then another. The forest looked dark. The hard, frozen lake lay like a sheet of lead. The mountains had disappeared, for over the land hung damp, icy mists. Large black crows flew about in silence. It was as if nature slept. At length, a sunbeam glided over the lake, and it shone like burnished silver. But the snow on the fields and the hills did not glitter as before. The white form of winter sat there still, with his unwandering gaze fixed on the south. He did not perceive that the snowy carpet seemed to sink, as it were, into the earth, that here and there a little green patch of grass appeared, and that these patches were covered with sparrows. Tee-wit, tee-wit. Is spring coming at last? Spring. How the cry resounded over field and meadow, and through the dark brown woods, where the fresh green moss still gleamed on the trunks of the trees, and from the south came the 2 first storks flying through the air. And on the back of each sat a lovely little child, a boy and a girl. They greeted the earth with a kiss, and wherever they placed their feet, white flowers sprung up from beneath the snow. Hand in hand, they approached the old Iceman, Winter, embraced him, and clung to his breast. And as they did so, in a moment, all 3 were enveloped in a thick, damp mist, dark and heavy, that closed over them like a veil. The wind arose with mighty rustling tone and cleared away the mist. Then the sun shone out warmly. Winter had vanished away, and the beautiful children of spring sat on the throne of the year. "This is really a new year," cried all the sparrows. "Now we shall get our rights, and have some return for what we suffered in winter." Wherever the 2 children wandered, green buds burst forth on bush and tree. The grass grew higher, and the cornfields became lovely in delicate green. The little maiden strewed flowers in her path. She held her apron before her. It was full of flowers. It was as if they sprung into life there, for the more she scattered around her, the more flowers did her apron contain. Eagerly, she showered snowy blossoms over apple and peach trees, so that they stood in full beauty before even their green leaves had burst from the bud. Then the boy and the girl clapped their hands, and troops of birds came flying by. No one knew from whence, and they all twittered and chirped singing, "Spring has come." How beautiful everything was. Many an old dame came forth from her door into the sunshine and shuffled about with great delight, glancing at the golden flowers which glittered everywhere in the fields, as they used to do in her young days. The world grew young again to her, as she said, "It is a blessed time out here today." The forest already wore its dress of dark green buds. The thyme blossomed in fresh fragrance. Primroses and anemones sprung forth, and violets bloomed in the shade, while every blade of grass was full of strength and sap. Who could resist sitting down on such a beautiful carpet? And then the young children of spring seated themselves, holding each other's hands, and sang, and laughed, and grew. A gentle rain fell upon them from the sky, but they did not notice it, for the raindrops were their own tears of joy. They kissed each other and were betrothed. And in the same moment, the buds of the trees unfolded, and when the sun rose, the forest was green. Hand in hand, the two wandered beneath the fresh pendant canopy of foliage, while the sun's rays gleamed through the opening of the shade in changing and varied colors. The delicate young leaves filled the air with refreshing odor. Merrily rippled the clear brooks and rivulets between the green, velvety rushes, and over the many-colored pebbles beneath. All nature spoke of abundance and plenty. The cuckoo sang and the lark caroled, for it was now beautiful spring. The careful willows had, however, covered their blossoms with woolly gloves, and this carefulness is rather tedious. Days and weeks went by, and the heat increased. Warm air waved the corn as it grew golden in the sun. The white northern lily spread its large green leaves over the glossy mirror of the woodland lake, and the fishes sought the shadows beneath them. In a sheltered part of the wood, the sun shone upon the walls of a farmhouse, brightening the blooming roses and ripening the black, juicy berries, which hung on the loaded cherry trees with his hot beams. Here sat the lovely wife of summer, the same whom we have seen as a child and a bride. Her eyes were fixed on dark gathering clouds, which in wavy outlines of black and indigo were piling themselves up like mountains, higher and higher. They came from every side, always increasing like a rising, rolling sea. Then they swooped towards the forest, where every sound had been silenced, as if by magic. Every breath hushed, every bird mute. All nature stood still in grave suspense. But in the lanes and the highways, passengers on foot or in carriages were hurrying to find a place of shelter. Then came a flash of light, as if the sun had rushed forth from the sky, flaming, burning, all devouring. and darkness returned amid a rolling crash of thunder. The rain poured down in streams. Now there was darkness, then blinding light, now thrilling silence, then deafening din. The young brown reeds on the moor waved to and fro in feathery billows. The forest boughs were hidden in a watery mist, and still light and darkness followed each other. Still came the silence after the roar, while the corn and the blades of grass lay beaten down and swamped, so that it seemed impossible they could ever raise themselves again. But after a while, the rain began to fall gently. The sun's rays pierced the clouds, and the water drops glittered like pearls on leaf and stem. The birds sang. The fishes leaped up to the surface of the water. The gnats danced in the sunshine, and yonder, on a rock by the heaving salt sea, sat Summer himself, a strong man with sturdy limbs and long, dripping hair. Strengthened by the cool bath, he sat in the warm sunshine, while all around him renewed nature bloomed strong, luxuriant, and beautiful. It was summer, warm, lovely summer. Sweet and pleasant was the fragrance wafted from the clover field, where the bees swarmed round the ruined tower. The bramble twined itself over the old altar, which, washed by the rain, glittered in the sunshine, and thither flew the queen bee with her swarm, and prepared wax and honey. But Summer and his bosom wife saw it with different eyes. To them, the altar table was covered with the offerings of nature. The evening sky shone like gold. No church dome could ever gleam so brightly. And between the golden evening and the blushing morning, there was moonlight. It was indeed summer. And days and weeks passed. The bright scythes of the reapers glittered in the cornfields. The branches of the apple trees bent low, heavy with the red and golden fruit. The hop, hanging in clusters, filled the air with sweet fragrance, and beneath the hazel bushes, where the nuts hung in great bunches, rested a man and a woman, Summer and his grave consort. "See," she exclaimed, "what wealth, what blessings surround us. Everything is homelike and good. And yet, I know not why, I long for rest and peace. I can scarcely express what I feel. They are already plowing the fields again. More and more the people wish for gain. See, the storks are flocking together and following the plow at a short distance. They are the birds from Egypt who carried us through the air. Do you remember how we came as children to this land of the north? We brought with us flowers and bright sunshine and green to the forests, but the wind has been rough with them, and they are now become dark and brown, like the trees of the south. But they do not, like them, bear golden fruit. "Do you wish to see golden fruit?" said the man. "Then rejoice." And he lifted his arm. The leaves of the forest put on colors of red and gold, and bright tints covered the woodlands. The rose bushes gleamed with scarlet hips, and the branches of the elder trees hung down with the weight of the full, dark berries. The wild chestnuts fell ripe from their dark green shells, and in the forests the violets bloomed for the second time. But the queen of the year became more and more silent and pale. "It blows cold," she said, "and night brings the damp mist. I long for the land of my childhood." Then she saw the storks fly away, every one, and she stretched out her hands towards them. She looked at the empty nests. In one of them grew a long-stalked cornflower. In another, the yellow mustard seed, as if the nest had been placed there only for its comfort and protection, and the sparrows were flying round them all. "Tweet, where has the master of the nest gone?" cried one. "I suppose he could not bear it when the wind blew, and therefore he has left this country. I wish him a pleasant journey." The forest leaves became more and more yellow. Leaf after leaf fell, and the stormy winds of autumn howled. The year was now far advanced, and upon the fallen, yellow leaves lay the queen of the year, looking up with mild eyes at a gleaming star, and her husband stood by her. A gust of wind swept through the foliage, and the leaves fell in a shower. The summer queen was gone, but a butterfly, the last of the year, flew through the cold air. Damp fogs came, icy winds blew, and the long, dark nights of winter approached. The ruler of the year appeared with hair white as snow, but he knew it not. He thought snowflakes falling from the sky covered his head, as they decked the green fields with a thin, white covering of snow. And then the church bells rang out for Christmas time. "The bells are ringing for the newborn year," said the ruler. "Soon will a new ruler and his bride be born, and I shall go to rest with my wife in yonder light-giving star." In the fresh, green firwood, where the snow lay all around, stood the angel of Christmas, and consecrated the young trees that were to adorn his feast. "May there be joy in the rooms, and under the green boughs," said the old ruler of the year. In a few weeks, he had become a very old man, with hair as white as snow. "My resting time draws near. The young pair of the year will soon claim my crown and scepter." "But the night is still thine," said the angel of Christmas, "for power, but not for rest. Let the snow lie warmly upon the tender seed. Learn to endure the thought that another is worshipped, whilst thou art still Lord. Learn to endure being forgotten while yet thou livest. The hour of thy freedom will come when spring appears. And when will spring come? Asked Winter. It will come when the stork returns, and with white locks and snowy beard, cold, bent, and hoary, but strong as the wintry storm, and firm as the ice, old Winter sat on the snowdrift-covered hill, looking towards the south, where Winter had sat before, and gazed. The ice glittered, the snow crackled, the skaters skimmed over the polished surface of the lakes. Ravens and crows formed a pleasing contrast to the white ground, and not a breath of wind stirred. And in the still air, old Winter clenched his fists, and the ice lay fathoms deep between the lands. Then came the sparrows again out of the town, and asked, "Who is that old man?" The raven sat there still, or it might be his son, which is the same thing. And he said to them, "It is Winter, the old man of the former year. He is not dead, as the calendar says, but he is guardian to the spring, which is coming." "When will spring come?" asked the sparrows. "For we shall have better times then, and a better rule. The old times are worth nothing." And in quiet thought, old Winter looked at the leafless forest, where the graceful form and bends of each tree and branch could be seen. And while Winter slept, icy mists came from the clouds, and the ruler dreamt of his youthful days and of his manhood. And in the morning, dawn, the whole forest glittered with hoar frost, which the sun shook from the branches. And this was the summer dream of Winter. "When will spring come?" asked the sparrows. "Spring!" Again the echo sounded from the hills on which the snow lay. The sunshine became warmer, the snow melted, and the birds twittered. Spring is coming. And high in the air flew the first stork, and the second followed. A lovely child sat on the back of each, and they sank down on the open field, kissed the earth, and kissed the quiet old man. And, as the mist from the mountain top, he vanished away and disappeared. And the story of the year was finished. "This is all very fine, no doubt," said the sparrows, "and it is very beautiful. But it is not according to the calendar, therefore it must be all wrong." On Judgment Day, the most solemn of all the days of our life, is the day we die. It is Judgment Day, the great sacred day of transfiguration. Have you really seriously given a fleeting thought to that grave and mighty last hour we shall spend on earth? There was once a man, a staunch upholder of truth, as he was called, to whom the word of his God was law, a zealous servant of his zealous God. With a stern but heavenly look. The angel of death stood at his bedside. "The hour has come. You shall follow me," said Death, and touched the man's feet with ice-cold fingers, and his feet became like ice. Then Death touched his forehead, and lastly his heart. And when it burst, the soul was free to follow the angel of death. But during those brief seconds, while the icy touch shivered through feet and head and heart, there passed through the mind of the dying man, like great ocean waves, the recollection of all he had wrought and felt throughout his life. So does one terrified glance into a whirlpool reveal in thought, as swift as lightning, the whole unfathomable depth of it. So with one fleeting glance at the countless stars of heaven, can one conceive the infinite multitude of worlds and spheres in the great universe. In such a moment, the terrified sinner shrinks into himself and has nothing to cling to, and he feels himself shrinking further into infinite emptiness. And at such times, the devout soul bows its head to the Almighty and yields itself up to Him in childlike trust, praying, "Thy will be done with me." But this dying man had not the mind of a child, nor was he a terrified sinner. His thoughts were of self-praise. He knew that he had abided by religious traditions. Millions, he knew, would have to face judgment. But he believed most confidently that his path would lead straight heavenward, and that mercy, promised to all men, would open the gates to him. And the soul followed the angel of death, casting only one wistful glance back at the bed, where, in its white shroud, lay the lifeless image of clay, still bearing the print of the soul's individuality. Now they hovered through the air, now glided along the ground. Were they passing through a vast, decorated hall, or perchance a forest? It was hard to tell. Nature appeared formally, set out for show, as in the stately, artificial, old French gardens, and through its strange, carefully arranged scenes, there passed many men and women, all clad as if for a masquerade. "Such is human life," spoke the angel of death. It seemed as if the figures tried to disguise themselves. Those who flaunted the glories of velvet and gold were not always the noblest and the richest. Neither were all those who wore the garb of poverty the most wretched and vulgar. A strange masquerade, indeed, and most strange of all, was to see how each one carefully concealed under his clothing something he would not have the others discover. Each was determined to learn his neighbor's secret, and they tore at one another until here and there the heads of different animals were bared. One was that of a grinning ape another the head of a goat, still others a clammy snake, and a feeble fish. In all was some token of the animal which is fast rooted in human nature, and which here was struggling and jumping to burst forth. And however closely a person might hold his garment over it to hide it, the others would never rest until they had torn aside the veil. And all kept crying out, "Look here! See! It is he! It is she!" And everyone mockingly laid bare his fellow's shame. "Then what was the animal in me?" inquired the soul. The angel of death silently pointed to a haughty form, around whose head spread a bright glory of rays, with shining colors, but in whose heart could be seen lurking, half hidden, the feet of a peacock. The spreading glory above was merely the speckled tail of the peacock. As they passed on, huge birds shrieked horribly at them from the boughs of trees. In voices harsh but clear, intelligible and human, they cried, "You who walk with death, do you remember me?" All the evil thoughts and lusts that had lurked within the man from birth to death now called after him in forbidding tones, "Do you remember me?" For a moment, the soul shuddered, for it recognized the voices. It could not deny knowledge of the evil thoughts and desires that were now rising as witnesses against it. In our flesh, in our evil nature, nothing good lives, said the soul. But at least with me, thoughts never turned into action. The world has not seen their evil fruit. The soul rushed on to escape the ugly screams, but the huge black birds swept in circles, screaming out their vicious words louder and louder, as though they wished to be heard to the ends of the world. The soul fled like a hunted stag, and at every step stumbled against sharp flint stones, painfully cutting his feet on them. How came these sharp stones here? They seem like mere withered leaves lying on the ground. Each stone is some careless word you have spoken, which wounded your neighbor's heart far more deeply than these sharp flints that now hurt your feet. I never thought of that, cried the soul. Judge not, that ye be not judged, rang through the air. In a moment, the soul recovered from its self-abasement. We have all sinned, but I have kept the law and the gospel. I have done what I could do. I am not like the others, sir. And then he stood at the gates of heaven itself, and the angel who guarded the entrance asked, "Who are you? Tell me your faith, and show it to me in your works." "I have faithfully kept all the commandments," replied the soul proudly. "I have humbled myself in the eyes of the world. I have hated and persecuted evil and those who practice it, and I would do so still with fire and sword, had I yet the power." "Then you are a follower of Muhammad?" said the angel. I? Never. He who strikes with the sword shall perish by the sword. Thus spoke the Son. His religion you do not have. Are you then, perchance, one of the children of Israel, who with Moses said, "An eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth"? I am a Christian. I see it neither in your faith nor in your actions. The teaching of Christ is forgiveness, love, and mercy. Mercy. The echo of this rang through infinite space. The gates of heaven opened, and the soul hovered toward the realms of eternal bliss. But the flood of light that streamed forth from within was so dazzling, so penetrating, that the soul shrank back as from a double-edged sword. And the sound of music was so soft and touching that no mortal tongue could describe it. The soul trembled and prostrated itself lower and lower, and the celestial light cut through it until it felt as it had never felt before, the weight of its own pride and cruelty and sin. Whatever good I have done in the world, I did because I could not do otherwise. But the evil that I did, that was of myself. And more the soul was dazzled and overwhelmed by the pure light of heaven. It seemed falling into a bottomless abyss, the abyss of its own nakedness and unworthiness, shrunk into itself, humbled, cast out, unfit for the kingdom of heaven, trembling at the thought of the just and holy God, hardly dared it to gasp, "Mercy, Jah." And the angel of mercy came to him, the mercy he had not expected. And in the infinite space of heaven, God's everlasting love filled the soul. Holy, loving, glorious forever shalt thou be, O erring human spirit, sang the chorus of angels. And as this soul did, so shall we all, on our last day on earth, humbly tremble in the glorious sight of the kingdom of heaven. But the infinite love and mercy of our Heavenly Father will carry us through other spheres, so that, purified and strengthened, we may ascend into God's eternal light.